When this pod's a rockin'.
Don't come a knockin'.
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds.
Are they in the proper approach pattern for today? Negative. Hold the weapon! Now! Charge the lightning field!
Welcome back to Dispatch Ajax.
Hey! I'm the killer clown.
Who let you in here?
Door was open.
There is literally a spider crawling across my computer screen as we speak, which
Is it
proves...
a long legs?
No. This is a tiny, weird little one. But...
Does he have like a funny hat? Is that what makes him...
he just made a little web and went down into my USB hub. That's fun.
Well, into the Matrix it goes.
Yep. Oh, man. Now Ukraine has complete access to everything that we do.
Finally.
Which is fine. I guess that just proves that it is spooky season.
I'm spooked.
I'm a little spooked. It's kind of weird watching it trying to get out of the USB port.
No. Go back on the net.
It's a feature, not a bug.
We have to get Sandra Bullock. Spider, get in there. Do your duty. Please kill Dennis Miller.
Please.
This is unrelated to the pod and unrelated to you, Spider. This is just a call to arms.
A desperate call for help. Fill a super soaker with holy water and please kill Dennis Miller with it.
Someone needs a Lost Boy Dennis Miller's ass.
He couldn't handle Angie Everhart. How's he going to handle us? Come on.
I can't even handle us.
I can't handle Angie Everhart.
Who could?
Not Sylvester Stallone, apparently.
Did she get tired of squatting over the glass tables?
No, you're thinking of Vince McMahon again.
No, that's a Stallone thing too.
You think they ever had parties together? I bet they did. Those roid head.
Oh yeah, well, I'm sure that Stallone and Hogan, because they were in projects together, and so probably became buds.
What were they in? What were they in together?
They were in
Rocky, obviously.
Yeah.
Duh. Fuck. I'm an idiot.
I think that was the only thing they were in together.
I guarantee you that's the only thing they were ever in together. I think honestly, there's a better chance that Hulk Hogan was in more stuff with Christopher Lloyd than Sylvester Stallone.
Definitely at least one.
Right, so at least you're tied.
I'm trying to think. What else could they have been in together?
It's like a weird 6 degrees of separation when you have shitting on a table as your pivot point between Sylvester Stallone.
Where do you think Christopher Lloyd fits into that?
He got locked in the bathroom. That's he fell and hit his head in the bathroom. Missed all of the fun.
Oh, I forgot Shelley Duvall was in that.
Oh, shit, really? Oh, yeah. God, I haven't thought about that in at least 30 years.
Well, I saw Suburban Commando again, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Why would you ever do that?
Well,
I watch a lot of bad stuff, but why would you ever intentionally watch Suburban Commando?
Well, sometimes you just gotta, refresh your memory.
All right, fine. No, actually, no. I understand what you think you're saying. What you just said does not help.
I forgot. Elizabeth Moss, she's like a little girl in that, in Suburban Commando. I'd forgotten about that. But I did point it out when I watched it.
Which is worse, that or her Scientology upbringing?
You know what? These are probably connected.
Hand in hand, I'm sure.
And then Mr. Nanny. Mr. Nanny has one of the best opening unknown... It's one of those scenes where people talk about it in the background. You ever see those greatest extras in the background doing things that are super weird?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
At the beginning of Mr. Nanny, if I remember right, because I don't think it's Suburban Commando. I think it's Mr. Nanny. He's driving down on his motorcycle down the road, and he's going by this lake. There's this guy, and he has this golden retriever in his arms, and he just throws the dog off the dock into the water. It's just happening as he's driving by.
Oh, that's good.
No context.
Really good. It's like the great Jurassic World daiquiri guy.
Yes, yeah. Welcome back to Dispatch Ajax. This is Jake.
I'm Skip.
That's Skip. Again, it is spooky times. skips giving birth.
Unrelated sounds.
Okay. Unrelated to his birthing process. Today, I wanted to speak about a book that I read that I'm holding up for you all to see.
Oh my God, he's holding Mein Kampf. Ladies and gentlemen,
so
this is not
this
okay.
Under my pillow.
The Nazi fairy brought
The
you.
Nazi fairy.
He put no. Because the joke is in that scenario that you put a gold tooth under your pillow.
God.
So let's not go there.
Oh.
No.
It's not that. This is a book called Harvest: The True Story of Alien Abduction by GL Davies.
By Adolf Hitler.
By some guy named Hister. I'm not sure.
That's actually an old Monty Python joke too. That's funny.
No, there's no Hitler in this. There is a mention of the Holocaust. Kind of unrelated.
Kind of.
I mean, it's full of a lot of facts, supposedly, that I just don't believe.
I don't know that this book exists, and I'm holding it in front of you.
This is probably just an invention of the liberal media, showing their bias in my hand. I reject this reality and substitute my own. So I originally heard about this book on a podcast years and years ago. I think maybe Mysterious Universe. I'm not 100% sure. But it sounded like some alien interactions and abduction scenarios that I've never heard of. It sounded really interesting. So I got the book and I read it. The book's not bad. If you go on like Goodreads or Amazon, there's a lot of people giving it 5 stars, and it's just transformative, amazing writing. It's not that. It's perfectly serviceable. It is short. You're talking less than 150 pages. It's pretty straight to the point. Does a good job of just kind of telling this woman's story. There's a couple parts where he kind of interjects some things, some history of some other UFO-related stuff that happened around the area of Wales that she's living in and from. But I would say it's, again, serviceably written, does a decent job, because his deal before he stopped, I believe he stopped writing after this book. He had done some previous books, I think one about a haunted house and a haunting that he was researching. But when he was reached by this woman to tell her story about what she'd experienced, he took it as kind of like an investigative journalist trying to do some research into her story, but letting her tell her side of things. And he has some feedback because it's kind of told through a series of interviews where he's like, well, what about this? And did you check, with a doctor about this thing? And have you thought about some other scenarios of,
have you had that looked at?
Do you hear growls in the refrigerator?
They hate it when I do this.
Yeah, it's a Token Spirit Guide might be a reference.
Did you say Token Spirit Guide? Because that's even funnier.
He questions certain elements of her story and explores options of sleep deprivation or, PTSD or traumatic events in her life manifesting in other ways. But I think as you get into the depth of her story and some of the things that she purports to have experienced and witnessed, I'm not necessarily going to say it's so outlandish and so disturbing that I believe her. The whole story is told under anonymity. You don't know the woman's name. You never meet her. She has not tried to put out more stories through him. It's a fairly small book, not a huge printing. He doesn't go on a whole lot of podcasts and radio shows talking about it. It's kind of just like, hey, I'm telling this woman's story. It's out there. If it's true, this is truly horrific stuff that's happening. But he just kind of wanted to let her express herself and then walk away from it all. As she tries to live her life.
Yeah, I think that's a positive, but it also adds a lot of fuel to the very obvious, detractors who are like, oh, she's anonymous.
Right.
And
it's that double-edged sword. You have, hey, no, there's totally this woman and she experiences crazy stuff. This is what she said. But there's also the other side of, she's not going on talk shows. She's not trying to secure book deals. She's not trying to make a movie out of this.
Unfortunately, there have been incidents of situations like that where they are just completely invented.
Oh, right. Yeah. No, again, honestly, we have no way of knowing. But like so much of this phenomena, you have no way of proving or disproving.
Like Woody Derenberger.
Yeah.
With that couple, the
Betty and Barney Hill?
Yes, Barney, the Hills. Yes, the Hills.
Yeah. At least Derenberger, he tried to like write a book about things and sold his story.
But they weren't all that bright was kind of the biggest problem.
Yeah.
But they were everyone said they were sincere, so that's why it gained so much traction. So yeah.
And you do have, at least you have those elements of them, like they have recordings of them going through regression therapy and you
which
hear the, well, yes, that also comes with some
heavy caveats.
There's also a lot of stuff with like some of Betty's stories about the space people helping and her proclamations about star charts and stuff. It's like,
it's all kind of way out there, but even Betty was like, some of his stuff is like super credible, and he seems like a really grounded person. But then some of the stuff he says, you're like, I don't know what happened here. I don't know.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's just how it is with witness testimony. I mean, but it's not any different than things like Sybil.
Very worst. Let's say you don't believe anything about this book, about this woman, Susan, or about GL Davies' stories.
Uh-huh.
At least some of it's pretty creepy and disturbing. And that is what I plan to bring to you on this spooky Halloween episode.
It's especially spooky when you say it that way.
It's not spooky. It's spooky. So I'm just kind of I don't want to, in case someone wants to find the book and read it, I don't want to like spoil too much, and I also don't want to like put too much out there. So I'm just going to pick a few things, kind of give you a general overview, outline of her story and her experience, and then dig deep and, tell you a few of the more odd supposed alien or other entity encounters and some of the more horrific stuff that she says she saw and experienced. So this young woman, she's in college. This is in 2009 in Wales, and, living her life, having a great time. She's, again, in school, planning for the future. She goes out with some friends out to one of their houses off in the woods.
Because that's all there is in Wales.
And they're, waiting for some boys to show up, this group of 5 girls and whatnot.
Aren't we all?
Hopefully tomorrow. Our cards right. She has experience. There's some stuff where is she dreaming? Is she not dreaming? And actually a lot of what she describes in this book, in her stories, are kind of this weird towing the line between these dream states and these real states. It kind of seems like if you're well acquainted with stories about aliens and extraterrestrial contact and alien abductions, you get a lot of what's called screen memories, where you seem to be interacting with one thing or seeing one thing, but it appears to be something else that's pulling the strings, or maybe they're trying to like put the wool over your eyes and show you one thing when something else is happening. So you get a lot of that. But it starts out where she's with the family dog has come up with her, and she's in this locked room because she's kind of having like I think a headache or whatever from drinking a little bit. And she was by herself, and then she experienced some missing time. Not a whole lot. But then she has another experience later that night of seems to be a presence in the room. She kind of sees something, and then hours have gone by, and she wakes up and the dog's gone. And she just assumes that other people had, their friends had come and she was deep asleep and they'd come and take the dog for a walk. When she comes down to greet everybody, she's like, "Where's the dog?" Unfortunately, the dog seems to have been taken or ran away, strangely enough, that night. Never found again. And this unfortunately led to like a break with this friend. She was blamed for losing the dog, and they didn't believe any of her stories, what she was saying. And she was kind of like a little weirded out, not really sure what had been happening. That happens. It's weird. She's kind of gets excommunicated from her friend group. She starts having these nightmare dreams where she will be on the street. She seems to be younger, and she'll be interacting with this entity who will be taking her places and showing her things. It gets more and more bizarre. Weird. Again, I'm not going to get into a lot of the details with this because I kind of want to get to the quote-unquote juicier stuff.
Sure.
But I mean,
I feel like it'd be really interesting to like talk to a therapist about this, an actual professional therapist about this.
Like have her talk to her or
Well, no, just in general, just have a discussion based on these accounts, because this is all you're going to get out of it. But like, I feel like a lot of these things that are, and this is just the surface, but a lot of the things that have already been, presented, I feel like are maybe trauma being processed in a way.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, quite possible. And there's like, she interacts with what seems to be her grandmother who's passed away.
Oh, okay.
Who seems to be talking to her about certain things and leading her places to see other entities and whatnot. And then like these weird like cinema scenes where she'll be in these rooms and like it looks like a movie theater, but they'll play weird things.
Sure, it's not Twin Peaks. That just sounds like Twin Peaks.
Weird stuff like ants tearing a creature apart.
Oh, I took film history. Come on, you just watch Antebellum Dog by by Salvador Dali. Come on.
But then there's like weird stuff of like.
Antebellum. I meant Andalusian. Why did I say antebellum?
No,
that's
odd.
Andalusian. I don't know where that came from. It's Andalusian dog. Sorry, Jesus Christ.
But she'd start seeing scenes of the Holocaust, or like a Holocaust, where like a woman's brain was bashed in, and like people's faces melted off, and it's just horrifying stuff. And then sometimes there'd be voices asking her weird things, of like if she was raped, would she enjoy it?
Sounds like the beginning of Terminator 2. Is Sarah Connor having all those nightmares about?
Yeah, it is kind of like that.
Interesting.
So she sees a lot of this weird stuff in these dreams. Sorry, she's interacting with these things, but it's still kind of amorphous. She doesn't really see aliens. Not little grays or anything. I think she does see some weird entities.
Okay.
There's like this woman in red that later on in the book in her story seems to stop time and things, and will go in between her dreams and the waking worlds. A lot of things that kind of are hard to explain and don't really make sense.
Sure, Neil Gaiman didn't write this.
But after she wakes up from one of these dreams, she sees this. Okay, and I'm gonna read verbatim here for a bit.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. I woke up in bed. I was unable to move. I felt a huge pressure on my chest, just like the sleep paralysis that Aunt had spoken about. So at this point, she had moved out of her apartment. She tried living with her parents, but she didn't want to worry them. She had an aunt who lived close by and was like really nice to her. She lived alone with her cat, so they moved in together. She felt having someone there make her feel a little more comfortable. Her aunt was very thoughtful and understanding and was trying to help her with things. There was a rushing in my ears and a weight on my chest. I shifted my eyes to my right, and I could see Auntie and Moggs, the cat, across the hall asleep in their bed. Auntie had left her light on. I saw a tall, slim, hazy figure pass in the hallway.
Oh no.
Then I saw something that was so unbelievably strange in my aunt's bedroom. I can only describe it as a jellyfish. On top of her bed was this thing. It had a large, bulbous, transparent mass for a body that was filled with what looked like bio-illuminated lights, like the sort of lights you see on creatures deep under the sea. The jelly-like mass was supported by incredibly thin, segmented legs, like the legs of an insect, but so thin it seemed that it would be impossible to support the body on top. The lights in the body flashed red, yellows, and blues. There seemed to be a sac on his back, like a lung that was opening and closing and emitting a yellow mist or gas. It was on top of my aunt. I tried to scream. I wanted to wake her up and warn her. I wanted to get up, throw the nearest thing at it, to run in there and to tear the creature from her bed. I wanted to stomp on it until it was no more than a slimy pulp. The creature got close to my aunt's face, and the two long, thin, vein-like tendrils emerged from the area where a head would be. One tendril moved up to my aunt's face and it entered her nose, while the other stretched and moved on to the face of Moggs, the cat. My auntie lay there while this thing stood above her, its tendril stretching, unwinding into her nostril. I imagined it deep within her stomach, feeling around, planting eggs or seeds or sucking the life from her. Then Moggs started to lift into the air. This must sound surreal. She was still asleep, and she was a few feet off the bed, held up by the tendril that I could see had entered her mouth. Her little furry body hung limp. The creature began to quiver, and the colors in its mass changed colors more rapidly. I saw my auntie wake up and screamed. With that, she wakes up. It's the next morning, And her auntie, she can hear, is in the bathroom retching and throwing up.
Ooh.
She also felt nauseous.
Nauseated.
She also felt nauseated, thank you. She didn't want to tell her about the thing she had seen. She was a little too frightened to tell her about that. Moggs the cat was lying on the chair and looked awful. Her eyes were puffy and her nose looked raw as if it had been rubbing it. She started to panic. They put food out for Moggs, but unfortunately, not that long after that, the cat died.
Oh, no.
And then she had told her aunt about what she'd seen and then some of her other experiences. Unfortunately, her aunt was terrified by this whole thing and seemed to not want to say things, but said she couldn't have her with her anymore. And she kicked her out. And unfortunately, a few months after that, her aunt, who had no signs of illness months before, died of a quickly progressing cancer out of nowhere. So now she's on her own, and she's having more experiences, and things get weirder. She starts encountering this red woman. It was a female creature, humanoid, but it wasn't exactly human, and it would counter her in her dreams. And she started having these nightmares where she would be in a field and she would be naked, and there would be this owl that would be above her, and it seemed to be hunting her, and there was this fox in the ground, and the fox seemed to be like, hey, come with me, and she would follow the fox. And she remembers, being naked, walking through the grass, and then encountering other women who are also naked. Some old, some young children, and they feel like they were being taken somewhere, but then she'd wake up. And she would have pains in her body, sleepless, like she hadn't slept at all. She started getting really nervous, nauseated all the time. She'd had trouble eating. She was having trouble doing her job. She had to drop out of school. She moved away. She was just kind of in her own small studio apartment that she was just trying to get by and trying to figure out what was going on with her. Mm-hmm. I think she did seek out some help from a therapist, but it didn't. She kind of didn't believe her and didn't give her things. She was like, "Are you on drugs? Are you doing this or that?" She's like, right. No, and she was like, "Well, this isn't going to help me." But things get strange, and like that weird jellyfish creature, that's kind of one of the things I hadn't really heard that. That's one of those new alien things I'd never heard. And
that's fascinating.
These next scenes that I will read out to you, these are what really set the hook in me and made me seek this out and buy the book.
Basically, a lot of the stuff that has been presented feels like a cobbling together of a bunch of different really common phenomena for abductee culture, sleep paralysis, even shadow people. Mm-hmm. You know what? Hey, as a person who has experienced shadow people, we're not turning our noses up at that at all in any way, shape, or form. It just seems like combining a lot of very common, phenomena together in one experience.
Yeah. And you could read that again in two ways. One, it's someone who has taste of pop culture, post X-Files, post all of these books, you're kind of, it's going into her subconscious and being expressed in these different ways.
Sure. Maybe.
Story form. Or maybe a lot of these things sound familiar because the entities are using the same tactics with a variety of people, which is why these stories seem so familiar, case to case, person to person.
Well, the interesting thing about this, though, is that it's so much more complicated than most experiences or abductees or the inflicted of whatever. It seems like all of them, you know what I mean? Because we're dealing with succubi / alien abduction, paralysis stuff. Then we're dealing with the visual manifestation of an alien to a loved one, manipulating them. And it's more than just what you would get from a normal experience. In this context, even, a normal experience.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
It seems like an extreme outlier in that she's experiencing things that even those who experience those things only get one or two of them, and she's doing all of them.
Yeah, and there's plenty of other things. She has lights that seem to be following her. She goes on a date with a guy, and they go to McDonald's or something, and there's this light that's hovering over them, and then like goes over this river and is just kind of there. And the guy, he's like fascinated by it because he's like, oh wow, a UFO. And she's kind of like, oh, I'm uncomfortable. I want to go. He's like, fuck off. I want to watch this UFO. Interesting to him, but she feels that there's more to it.
So it's not just a Henry Hill scenario, like someone else actually also... Well, actually, in that scenario, she thought she saw them too. But I mean, it's not a panicked, paranoid, I saw helicopters or whatever. We're dealing with somebody else literally saw the same phenomenon that she did.
Yes. They both what amounted to lights in the sky. Which could have been anything.
Yeah, but it's not all just in her head and her telling us about
right. But I mean,
him
again,
thinking that.
But we don't know. This is a story from her. So, and this is told through this author that we're all assuming that this is on the up and up and whatnot.
Right.
So
it's so many different tropes all at once.
Yeah. With a lot of cases, you have those blending of elements and the high strangeness occurs, where it's like someone will be alien contact and then they'll also have stuff like Bigfoot is reported in the same area or weird poltergeist activity or, odd like time slip stuff. There are these Venn diagrams. This is all like, a lot of the stuff I've heard before up until we get really to these next bits.
Okay. So where does the sundown clown?
You wish the sundown clown was here.
I wish the sundown clown was here.
So she starts off with one of these dreaming times, but she realizes she's awake. This isn't a dream. She's fully awake, fully cognizant of what's going on. And she is naked in this field, and she's encountering these other women, all naked, being guided in a way, like they're all being shepherded, but there's this owl thing that's behind them.
Are you sure this isn't The Witch, that movie? Are you sure that's not what this is?
Black Phillip doesn't show up here, I'll tell you that.
Oh, man.
Oh, Black Phil. So she's like having this question, like, why are all these women here? What am I doing here? What's going on? And then they're being pushed forward in this single line. And then they slowly walk forward and they don't seem to have any control over this. And then this white light shows up above them. And they seem to be led into this light, and then they're in this room, and I'm going to kind of just hit some elements here, okay? The floor in this area seemed to be like walking barefoot on seaweed. It was organic and wet, slippery. It looked like a deep shade of red, but with the lights, it was difficult to say. I think now they could have been human remains, I'm not sure. Maybe it was an organic substance they grew or was used on the craft. Maybe it was growing from the remains of us. It was humid in there, stuffy, and I could only breathe through my nose, and the smell was awful. Sweet, sick, pee and shit. Just an awful smell of illness, death, fear, and people stripped down to their basic functions. They were, I imagine, 1,000 scared, naked people, women, all stuffed into a hangar, going to the toilet while they're all shuffling along, tightly packed, chest to back. The owl lights were floating around us, some hovering, some flying in a straight line, like they were monitoring us, shepherding us ever forward. I saw an old woman topple over and lie next to us, the knees of the woman behind hitting her in the back of the head and neck. An owl light swept over us and hovered, and from the light, the eye area, a long thing, pipe or tube, 6 feet or more, extended out till it was over her head. It must have attached itself to her. I couldn't see her through all the limbs in the way, but it flew off without restraint with the lady attached by the head and flew high up and then away from us. That was someone's mother, someone's grandmother, just taken away. To what end, I do not know, but no doubt horrific on every single level imaginable.
May I ask what year this testimony taken?
It says 2014. In 2014-15, the book came out, I believe, in 2019.
Okay. Because a lot of what she just described is detailed very clearly in Steven Spielberg's War of the Worlds. The red seaweed of human remains, the taken up into the thing, and it almost seems like, not exact, but a conflagration of that and a few other representations of this idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's definitely there.
It's so specific. And I'm not, trust me, I am not discounting. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
No, it's It behooves us to approach all of this with a skeptical mind.
Absolutely.
Don't,
I'm not rolling my eyes. I'm just asking.
No, eyes open to everything. That's kind of how I like to approach these things.
Absolutely, yes.
I don't know. I can neither prove nor disprove what she is saying. And I have no way of knowing, so I have to be agnostic about it all.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the most preponderance of evidence that exists here is just her story.
Right.
So it's hard to tell. And who knows, especially if it is some type of dream or something she's imagining, it's taking, again, from these elements of things she's seen, known about.
That's why I ask you. It's just because, I want to make it clear that you and I both want to believe. It's important to put things in context, and being skeptical is very, very important because we could just, otherwise we turn into Alex Jones at some point. You know what I mean? We have to be like, okay, we have to ground ourselves, and we have to really examine, what is this? What is it that you're experiencing? And sometimes, just like with the Sandown Clown, you're like, I don't know where that came from. Those kids, I don't know where they got that. It's so crazy that it's very possible that it's whatever they experienced. But with this, it's so many different pop culture media beats. Something happened to this person. I don't know if she's exactly articulating what she actually experienced, as opposed to maybe through a lens that's more familiar or more understandable.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's possible. Here, let me get through a little more.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Again, I'm just kind of jumping around to give you a flavor.
Sure.
Up ahead, I could hear agony, crying, screaming, recognizable sounds but muffled. It seemed that everything up here was muffled. The air, the sounds of the place, all muffled. I could feel air rushing in my lungs. I felt something wet and chunky hit my back, and I could only guess that the woman behind me had been sick on me. But there's no room, nowhere to move, only forward. Little shuffling baby steps, one at a time. We were walking through bodily waste. So she emerged into a bigger room. I can't explain what it was, only what it looked like. It was like little tubes of solid meat. Tiny tubes. There was more room to move, and some women stepped out of the column. Some fell, some crouched down, some stretched. Everyone looked terrified, but too subdued to do anything about it. I looked for an exit, somewhere to hide, but I couldn't even begin to comprehend where I was. It was as if my basic instinct of fight or flight had been turned off. Then something was sprayed on her, she doesn't know. The smell, stale and sickening. Some women were huddled together, some just trying to keep their wits about them. Soon we instinctively began walking again. We continued into... It is something so cruel, so horrific, I can't. It can only be likened to an abattoir. A factory of some description. It's not fair this happened. It's not fair to me, to any of us, and people don't want to know. They want to fucking laugh and call me a liar and a fraud, and guess what? Probably someone you know has or will go through this, and because of these idiots, the bullies, victims of this atrocity are living a life of fear, alone and frightened. People like us are ridiculed in the press and TV. This is a fucking abattoir. Do you understand me? Women, girls of all ages are being subjected to something inhumane, and no one is helping us. My herd, my line, we had it easy. We took in turns to have a pipe go into our genitals and a needle in the neck. That's what we had, and we were the lucky ones. It felt like a smear, but with a suction attached. They were taking something small from us, small enough but on a mass scale would be enough for whatever they needed. I stood in line while tendrils, pipes, tubes came from out of the walls, feeling us, inserting into us, pricking us with a needle or barb in the back of the head. It was a sharp, intense pain. It felt like something was being scraped and sucked out from inside me. It was the other things I saw that terrified me, because once I am done providing whatever it is they take from women like me, as we get older, they take something else. Then they take more. Then they use you for other things, and one day you are not waking up, never going home, and you are just a piece of all of this, waiting, praying for death, but they fill you with tubes and needles and keep you alive. I was sick until I couldn't be sick anymore when I witnessed what looked like half men. The bottom half of men, from the waist down. Everything below intact, and just a cluster of pipes and wires and tendrils for a torso, for the rest of the body attached to an overhead pipe or something. I have no idea what had become of the rest of the bodies. These legs were moving, their penis erect, and a series of women on conveyor belts, shackled down by an organic mass, like coral, something so strange, were presented to the lower halves of the men. The women were presented face down with their bottoms up, and men, whatever you call them, were having some weird mechanical jerky sex with them. Once they were done, another woman would be presented. There were about 50 of these mating things. They looked like they had been men. I can't tell you much more. I can only speculate that it was some type of insemination procedure. I don't know. I'm trying to tell you in ways that I can explain. So much is so insane and brutal that finding the words, even after all this time, is hard. She tells this story of this pregnant woman being milked like cows, tendrils like tubes stuck into their breast, and women giving pitiful, exhausted moans, milking transparent cocoon egg-like objects. She says she saw a section where women were giving birth, lying on a mince-like substance of the floor. No one helping. They would just lay there screaming and panting. The still pregnant mothers huddled against the walls, hands covering their heads, their ears, facing the wall, trying to remain invisible, trying to wake up from the nightmare. The women giving birth were not assisted, just pushing and screaming on the filthy floor, dozens of them. One of them pushed out a child with a huge grunt. Afterbirth spilled onto the floor. The mother grappled with what little strength she had to get the baby to her chest, but the light owls swooped in and the baby was gone. Umbilical cord ripped as it left. The woman lay there screaming, begging, as one of the bulbous creatures, the sort I had seen on Mog and on an ante, walked on its tall, impossibly thin legs towards her and dropped unceremoniously onto her. Her pain, her shouts muffled as the bloated creature covered her, its legs, its tendrils filling every orifice until she lay stiff. I could see half a dozen women lying still with the bulbous, colorful sacks, either eating them or planting in them. I don't know.
Wow.
That's,
It's a harrowing count.
Yeah. Beneath us was the birthing area where dozens of babies sat naked in a circle, like an arena. The faceless black men, with their thin arms and legs, stood watching the babies. Light owls seemed to take away the quietest babies, the babies exhibiting little fight for life, while the crying ones lay there being admired, sold off, who knows what purposes, with the alien beings I had first seen. I had always thought they were the ones in control, the top of the hierarchy, the overseers. I saw a conveyor belt, or some sort of thing, and on it was body parts, dismembered limbs, the corpses of the very old, the very young, those who didn't have the fortitude to survive the ordeal. But it was the area that the conveyor belt passed that made me the most terrified. Below in an arena, that's the best way I can describe it, an arena where hundreds and hundreds of women were herded. Their screams, their voices, pleading, crying, begging, will haunt me forever. The woman, the ones I could see, seemed to be older, past 40, maybe 50. Maybe their childbearing days were over, I can't say for sure. Some were dragged off by the light owls. Maybe they still had a use that needed them alive. The others, though, desperately tried to get away from a hub, climbing on top of each other, punching, fighting, no dignity, away from the central hub where a great many tendrils, pipes, whatever we are to call them, were grabbing women at random and conducting a quick medical procedure. A checkup, a medical procedure as tendrils probed their cavities, examined, needle sticking, tube sucking, always checking, were they still good, were they still in date, were they worth anything, could a profit be made on them. Some were harvested right there and then. Pipes filled them, they were pulled apart, pipes and tubes sucking up every drop, and a sack of skin and bones deposited on the conveyor belt. Dozens of women in an instant gone, dismembered. Their life, their memories, their world they had created, nothing more than a mineral or liquid for an alien industrialist or farmer. The lucky ones, they weren't totally extracted. They were pushed down a hole, but where they went I could not see. By telling you this, I can't go missing. I can't go on the craft and never be seen again, as now, if I go missing, everyone will know what's happened, and someone will have to help me, help the others. These things can't be as brazen as to keep coming for me. We must stop this. If I get pregnant on that ship, I am never coming back. Myself and my baby would be harvested, and I will just be another statistic, another missing person, another loony gone. We all looked at the walls, waiting for tubes and tendrils to shoot out, to start harvesting us, but instead a mist rose into the room, and soon it was as if we were all in a shower, calming, warming steam, and then relaxing droplets covered me. I remember nothing more on board the ship. I woke up, I was in a field. I was lying naked on the ground. I was surrounded by the familiar red light. I thought, when will it ever end? I stood up, and there in front of me, just a few feet, was the red brake lights of my car. My clothes were bundled by the car door. The car was about 20 feet up a track in a field, and had stopped just on an entrance to come to some woodland. I can't remember driving up there. I put on my clothes and sat in the car. The time said 20:03. It had been 3 minutes. I had witnessed a living hell, a scene from Hades, a nightmare that seemed to last for hours upon hours, and it all happened in 3 minutes. I was terribly thirsty. I had come on and had a vicious pain right behind my eye. They had let me go. For now. So she goes on to talk about how I believe that was her last abduction that she recalls. That's one of the last main stories they have. After that, GL kind of goes through and talks about some other things of like, hey, could it have been this? What about that? He has some questions and she goes on. But that was her last interview. After that, she left the area. She expected more things to happen to her, but she had no way of knowing or stopping, but she wanted her story to be out there. From interviews, what I have found from the author, she has since moved to Australia, trying to just get away from things. Supposedly, she keeps in contact with him, giving a phone call or an email contact every few years, and that if she ever stops contacting him, he will put out her actual name and information about her. She said that she never wanted her parents to be burdened with their daughter, who seemed to be so full of life and hope and possibilities, to turn out what, she kind of sees in her mind like a failure, and she doesn't want to bring that shame onto her family and friends. So she's just gone. Shame. Hopefully she's not experiencing anything like this anymore, but I always found... Again, there are many more stories in this book. There's plenty left to check out that you will find fascinating and also disturbing. But these scenes that she described of this harvesting of women, especially like she talks about how it's happening to all these people, and it may be happening to people whether it be, your young daughter or your grandmother or your best friend or your wife. It's all of these women experiencing this, and no one will believe them or understand what's going on. And if they disappear, like the statistics of how many thousands of women disappear every year, what if some of these things are from them, quote, harvesting them for whatever sick and disturbing purposes that these entities have. But it does tell a harrowing tale of things. A lot of times you'll hear... Through these abduction stories, there are different artificial insemination procedures, or taking ovum, creating hybrids, having these implants or these examinations and experiments done on them on these tables, maybe with multiple people on tables. But rarely do you hear these stories of meat rooms, almost like a factory farm for humans, that they're just cattle, whether it's for food, fuel, procreation, life essence, energy, who knows what. But again, what interested me was, just kind of these horrifying tales that she says she experienced. And again, absolutely. Is she real? Is she not? We can't say for certain. Did these stories, did they actually happen to a real person? Who's to say? But it is stories that will make your skin crawl, make you think a little more when you turn the lights off to go to bed. And for those people who are experiencing or believe they're experiencing something like this, maybe there's someone else out there who's experienced something similar. Maybe that weird headache you have, or the menstrual cramps that come out of nowhere that are worse than anything you've ever experienced, or these weird dreams or time slip elements you have, or the lights in the sky that pass by, Maybe it's this. Let's hope it's not. Certainly not anything I'd like to experience.
Well, no, not at all.
And I'd have to hope that this is all work of fiction, and fanciful ideas from the mind of an ingenious woman, or perhaps a devious author. Hopefully this is all elements from pop culture and other abduction stories, turned into this Hellraiserous nightmare that doesn't exist. But if it does, it's horrifying beyond compare.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I don't think that we should dismiss anyone who has these kinds of experiences at all. I think we should really look into it. We should start by taking them seriously and taking them at face value. But there's so many weird things in there, so many weird red flags and markers in there that are just, they don't seem like they make sense. Now, on the other hand, there is the argument that say, okay, aliens come all the way to Earth. Faster than light travel is almost impossible to do. You have an advanced civilization. It would take forever to get here. Why would they even bother? But the other day, I was actually researching the Kon-Tiki experiment. Where the guy, he was a Norwegian anthropologist, archaeologist, wanted to figure out how people got to Easter Island.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's in the middle of fucking nowhere. And he was unfortunately a horrible racist and completely incorrect with most of the stuff he did. But human beings with almost no technology whatsoever managed to take this enormous, seemingly insurmountable trek all the way to Hawaii, Easter Island, the Seychelles, all sorts of different places that are so far away from the rest of humanity that you would go, well, that doesn't make sense. You can't do that, but did, provably. I mean, there are giant fucking statues there, and there are people that live there. So that's actually your biggest thing. And so like when people say like, well, I mean, aliens would take forever to get here and it's not possible,
Yeah. And that's
like things that make no sense.
That's also like one thing, the more and more over the years, as I've delved into the paranormal,
Sure.
I've become less and less enamored with the thought of basic reality as we know it.
Okay.
Aliens build a ship just like we would, and they travel, faster than light or whatever, wormholes. I think things like extra dimensionality, the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis, beings that function in a completely different way than we understand. It's hard. I mean, for one, you're thinking like, well, aliens who build a ship and travel out, why would they do this? How would they do this? Yeah, I don't know. But there's so many other weird things that don't make any sense. There are multiple accounts of what seem to be hard, real craft turning into light and splitting off into, multiple balls and then reforming or blinking in and out of existence. And there's so many weird things that are associated, whether it's taking people from out of their beds and through walls, or seeming to, again, have hours and hours of experiences that happen all within what appear to be minutes to us.
I think the biggest problem is the reason you have to go into it both open-minded and skeptical is because this entire experience incorporates so many things that we can't even enumerate. But it's so full of the Bob Lazars and the David Icks and the Philadelphia experiments, which are so very easily disproven, but sound great, sound cool. For instance, like with conspirituality, that whole phenomenon where the facts don't have to be right, the vibes just have to feel right. You know what I mean? You just have to feel like it might make sense.
One thing, I don't think the existence of grifters is reason enough to discount possible occurrences and phenomenon. And two, I think the way I like to approach things is an empathetic, skeptical viewpoint.
Sure. Sure.
The only thing we can be sure of is that these people believe they had these experiences.
Absolutely. And that is an important thing to remember.
And
something happened to these people, or at least they believe it did. And that, so it's real to them.
It is real to them. I think trying to knock them down from their beliefs, to discount them, is dangerous, possibly extremely harmful.
Yes. And for other people who might experience phenomena that we don't understand, whether it's terrestrial and explainable or not, it is important to at least listen to them in a sincere and earnest fashion.
Yes.
Because going to them telling them they're crazy and an asshole isn't going to help anybody.
It's true. And being a human being to them and saying, I don't know what you experienced, but I can see that it affected you. And I'd like to help you deal
Let's look at it.
with whatever that is.
Yeah.
Whether it's real or not, whether it's all in your head, or it's actually something that is happening to you on a psychical, spiritual, physical level, whatever it may be. I'm sorry that it happened to you, and if there's anything we can do to be understanding, I feel like that's the best approach to take, because there's no way we can prove or disprove this woman's story or many people's stories, especially when we take the hardest of our reality as total, because there's so much we don't know and there's so much we can't know, especially in this phenomenon. And as for this pod, whether it's real or not, we can't say, whether they made it up or not, but I can say that it was quite the story.
Yes, absolutely. And harrowing.
Harrowing, disturbing, perhaps frightening, and on this Halloween, that's what we're trying to bring to you.
Absolutely. And let's keep this ball rolling. I mean, this is not a black or white scenario. We could go on for hours about how to approach these kinds of things, but we're just bringing you these things as they are.
Whether you take this fully and you believe it, or you can't stand it and it can't be true, I hope that at least kind of made you, gave you a little bit of little spookies.
Like the Sandown Clown.
Like the Sandown Clown. We live in a wild world, my friend. There's a lot of stuff we just don't know.
We sure do.
But one thing I do know is that we will be back in your earphones in the near future. But until then, we hope that you have enjoyed yourself on this fine pod. We hope that you like, share, subscribe. If there's anyone you think might be interested in this, maybe a fellow E-tier
experiencer.
Maybe this will be something they can identify with, take some solace in, that other people might be experiencing something like them. I certainly hope not, but if this can help anybody, by all means, share it with them. And if you'd like to make it more available to other experiencers, or maybe other people who just might be interested in this type of strangeness or whatever pop culture wackiness we might get up to, please leave 5 UFO reviews. Spherical silver UFOs, 5 of those on
5
the podcast app of your choice. Ideally, Apple Podcast. That's the easiest way for us to be seen. And again, thank you for listening. Skip, until next time, what should they do?
Well, they should definitely go back and listen to more of our episodes, like Jake said. And in the interim, before this podcast ends, they should pay their tabs. They should clean up after themselves to some sort of reasonable degree. They should pay their wait staff and bartenders and KJs, if applicable. And from Dispatch Ajax, we would like to say Godspeed, fair wizards.
Please, go away.